Okay, good evening. We would like to start today by saying that we respectfully acknowledge the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the O'odham and the Yaqui. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign native nations and indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. We also want to emphasize that this land acknowledgement is a milestone in our ongoing dialogue with the Tohono O'odham, the Pasqua Yaqui, and the 20 other federally recognized tribes in the state. It is an indicator of our commitment to collaboration and to maintaining government-to-government relationships with the native nations and indigenous communities with whom we share this region. My name is Alain-Philippe Durand, and I am the Dorrance Dean of the College of Humanities. The Department of Africana Studies is part of the College of Humanities. This program introduces students to fundamental issues and concepts in the Africana experience in the United States, Africa, and the Caribbean from an interdisciplinary perspective. It explores topics related to history, philosophy, politics, religion, culture, society, literature, and the arts with world-class faculty members. The interdisciplinary major in Africana Studies can be a perfect double major fit for students seeking a broad education and a more versatile skill set for the global economy. Africana Studies also offer the country's first minor in hip-hop studies, internship opportunities, study abroad programs, and an array of scholarship funds. Thank you for joining us for a Black History Month event sponsored by the College of Humanities, the Department of Africana Studies, and Arizona Humanities, the Council for the Humanities in Arizona. And I want to acknowledge the present and thank Brenda Thompson, who is the Executive Director. So thank you so much for your support. And I know Brenda well because I happen to serve on the Board of Directors with Brenda, and it's a great organization doing a lot supporting the humanities in our state. So thank you for being here and for your support. Tonight, we will be talking with Pamela McDonald. Dr. Tani Sanchez, who is a professor of practice with the Department of Africana Studies and a member of our Black History Month committee, was instrumental in bringing Pamela to our campus. Please welcome Dr. Sanchez.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about Black History Month, which started as Negro History Week in 1926 by Carter G. Woodson. He was the second African American to receive a doctorate from Harvard University, and I read that his grandmother was born in Africa. She was enslaved and brought over, but she was old enough to remember her past and to know that there was something lacking in the way that Black history was taught, something lacking in the way that people were understanding and perceiving African Americans or people of African descent. Her grandson, Carter G. Woodson, would dedicate his life and his career to the field of African American history, and that week would later turn into a month. So he was not the only one who was a force in this, but he certainly was a very significant force. So Africana Studies and the College of Humanities has a commitment to intercultural competence and to the ability to communicate effectively with people from diverse backgrounds. And so it's not surprising that we are sponsoring this event. I want to acknowledge, she's not here, but I'll acknowledge her anyway. Dr. Jennifer Donahue is also instrumental in helping this. We have a committee that does a lot of this work. So I am going to introduce Dr. Praise Zeninga. He's the head of the Department of Africana Studies. He's been our head since 2016, and he told me not to talk about him, but I do want to say a few words. He has been just incredibly good as a director. He has been involved in community fairs. He's been involved with NAACP, Urban League, supporting different groups, the Dunbar Pavilion, and it is really a delight to have him as our director. Dr.
Good evening and welcome. I would like to thank you, all of you, for joining us tonight for Social Art-Ivism, Black Panther Culture, from Oakland to the World with Pamela McDonald. McDonald is a former Fine Arts Museums director and an arts advocate, historian, activist, curator, and community organizer from San Francisco, California, and also Oakland, California. She currently resides in Philadelphia and is a graduate of Pomona College in Claremont, California. She studied at the Sorbonne in Paris and completed a master's and PhD studies in linguistics in Washington, D.C. as a Georgetown University graduate fellow. Her professional museum career was launched as a Smithsonian Institution doctoral fellow. In San Francisco, she has had a hand in the envisioning, rebuilding, and opening of 5 popular museums: the De Young Legion of Honor, Asian Art Museum, Museum of Performance and Design, and the Museum of the African Diaspora. So without much ado, please help me welcome Pamela McDonald to the stage.
I guess I better turn it on. I'm so pleased to be here tonight, and I'd like to thank everyone that's hosting this tonight, and I'd like to thank those of you who took the time to come out. I really appreciate it. I am going to start with, we've already had our land acknowledgement, but what I'd like to start is asking everybody if you wouldn't mind joining me. I don't like standing behind a table like this. I'd like to know if you wouldn't mind joining me in trying to put our minds in the mindset of not being here right now tonight. Not the weather outside, not how you parked or any of that, but to see yourself as someone who's a time traveler and someone who can beam themselves into another place. So if you don't mind closing your eyes with me for a second, if people who don't like to do that, it's okay. But if you don't mind closing your eyes with me for a second, and I'd like to ask you to take some breaths. So we're going to breathe in a few times. 4. 4. Out. 4. In. 4. Hold it. 4. And then out. 4. And then in again to 4. And out for 4. Now, keeping your eyes closed, imagine you're in a different time or place. I was alive in those days in this place, but I want you to be able to picture yourself in those times and in this place, because this presentation is about a time and a place and the human need to create and the human need to absorb something creative material in order for us to understand it. Thank you very much. You can open your eyes whenever you feel like it. So, I told people I had technical difficulties, but I didn't tell everybody. Some of the slides may be out of order, and some of the animation and music might not work, but I'm prepared. Over my cell phone if the music doesn't work. And
Take off your microphone.
how did I do that?
I'm not sure, but you did. There you go.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. I would like to start by explaining that we're going to be talking about Oakland, California. That's going to be on the next slide. But as the Professor Sanchez mentioned, the Black History Month festival this year, the organization that does Black History Month, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, or ASALH, the organization that Dr. Carter G. Woodson started in 1926 to begin Negro History Week. Every year we choose a theme, and this year's theme just happens to be Black resistance. Last year it had to do with health and healthcare, and my presentations were about epidemics. because there's an incredible history of Africans in this country and various epidemics, each disease, polio, tuberculosis. There's something, as you go through a history of America. You heard I have an art museum background, but for the past 5 years since I retired, I moved to Philadelphia just to study American history full time, because that's where the archives are. And it's so exciting to me. If I start to act passionate, understand, I know it, okay? But this is like a new world for me, is the ability to see original archival documents and to visit them. I go to Ben Franklin's library, which is down the street from me. Do you know Ben Franklin invented the library? I also live down the street from America's first hospital. Do you know Ben Franklin invented the idea of a hospital? So his library has documents from his time, from the 1700s. I mean, it's all still there. And so the ability to do that, but I want people to know that you don't have to, I don't have a lot of undergrads here, but you don't learn Black history from memes. Things are so great now, since the pandemic and even before, that all these closed libraries and universities, they were just digitizing and digitizing and digitizing documents. So when you go online, you can find things you didn't know you could find. Things written, I've got George Washington's handwriting, writing different things, and Thomas Jefferson's handwriting. It's, to me, having been a student a while ago, we had, books, textbooks, but we didn't do it ourselves. So when people say do your research, do it the way I want to tell you to do it, which is go in person, go online, but don't take the first thing online, and don't look at YouTube videos unless it's from an academic or scholar who's done the research. So I'm going to start with a scholar here, Dr. Angela Davis. And we'll be talking about her a lot later on. Is everybody okay? Here we go. We're going to be talking about something called Art-Ivism, which is activism with the arts. There was an experiment done called the Copenhagen experiment. And what they did was they looked at people and they tried to give them activist ideas. And they had different measures. Would it change their behavior, their attitudes, et cetera, et cetera. And they found that people remember things and understand things better if it's presented to them in a creative way. Now, we all know that's true. But when I tell this story of Oakland, California, you're going to see why it's so important. Oakland, California has one of the highest diversity indexes according to the US Census. Diversity index means, if you pick two citizens at random, any two, what is the probability that they live on a street with other people of different ethnicities? Okay? This is opposed to segregation. This is like everybody. And Oakland has 77% chance that if you find two Oaklanders, they probably live on a block with other people from other ethnicities. So and their kids go to school together, and maybe they go to the same church. So and this has been going on for a little while. The other thing about Oakland is that, in terms of census, more people list themselves as some kind of artist, as their occupation, than any other city in America. It could be musician, dancer, songwriter, any kind of arts. So it's full of all these artistic people. It's a center of activism because UC Berkeley is right next door. And so there's a kind of we're talking about going to another time and place. It's kind of like a stew. It was kind of like the Harlem Renaissance for a while there. And this is kind of a part of that. So I'm going to be talking about Black Panther Party culture. And what is Art-Ivism? Cultural activism. And I'm talking about things that go from Oakland, California to the world. So who here knows about the Black Panther Party? I bet you don't. The media gives us so much information about what things are, but if you do your own work, you can find out what people really think. You don't have to believe anybody, whether you agree. People like to listen to people who agree with them already and reinforce their own beliefs. It's better to go seek it yourself. And I'm here to spread the message. So the Black Panther Party culture is an example. I'm using Oakland as a case study. This has happened everywhere and happens all the time, that music and artistic and creative means are a way to reach people. You see, I designed a little Black Panther on my slides. This was supposed to be animated so that the words came up a little at a time so you could read it. I'm just going to read it out loud. Different quotes about what Art-Ivism is. I have from Ken Iser. All true artists are activists, if only because art is intended to stimulate new thought. And then we have from Eve Ensler. She's credited with inventing the term artivist. But I don't think she did. But anyway, if you look at these people in the Black Panthers and you go back in American history, you're going to see plenty of artivism. And I'll show you. She says, I think in these perilous times, a third way is emerging, a kind of escalated passion, a creative energy that comes from giving one's heart and soul and imagination to the struggle. This passion has all the ingredients of activism, but it's charged with the wild creations of art. These perilous times, a third way is emerging, a kind of, not aggression, but fierceness. I'm sorry, I had technical difficulties in my presentation. Not aggression, but fierceness. Not hurting, but confronting. Not violating, but disrupting. This passion has all the ingredients of activism, but as I said before, it's charged with the wild creations of art. She says, Art-Ivism is the place where edges are pushed, imagination is freed, and a new language emerges altogether. The artivist, artist, and actress, M.K. Asante says, uses their artistic talents to fight and struggle against injustice and oppression by any medium necessary. The artivist merges commitment to freedom and justice with the pen, the lens, the brush, the voice, the body, and the imagination. The artivist knows that to make an observation is to have an obligation. If you see something as an artist, you observe something, it's your obligation to do something about that. Nagara A. Kodumo says, the Black Panthers were very aware of the power of imagery and of the effects of repetition. The key markers and unifying aesthetic were always present as a constant reminder of who they were and what they stood for. No matter how you feel about Beyoncé or Black Panther the movie, you would not have either of those phenomena without the Panthers' iconography. When you talk about the power of pop culture, this is it, permanence. As much as we Americans claim the iconography of the Black Panther, and as much as it was American, she says, it was also shared with a lot of progressive movements in what we now call the post-colonial world. So I'm going to talk about the international influence to a certain extent. No, I realize there's a semester class in this, and we can't do justice to it, so you'll have questions at the end. So here's the first example of an artivist. I'm going to show you a little slideshow about the artist, the Spanish artist Pablo Picasso. One of his most famous paintings, Guernica. This happened during the days of Francisco Franco in Spain, if anybody remembers their European history. And the village of Guernica was completely destroyed, the people were killed. I'm going to give you a minute or two. Can you see? You can't see my slides from the side, folks. You should come over here. Yeah, I know you're fine. You look gorgeous, but I mean, I'm talking about, this is a slideshow, and you're going to have to look through me to see any of the pictures. I don't mind if you get up and move. Honestly, I'd feel more comfortable. And you back in the corner there, how are you going to see the presentation? You guys are taking care of me and got my hotel and flew me there. Oh, I'm sorry, I feel so stupid. I feel so stupid. You didn't say I can see it there.
It was, I don't think
Oh, he just put it on. He just put it on. Thank you. No wonder I knew I wasn't crazy. Sorry to do that to you folks, but at least I can see your beautiful face. So Guernica, I'm going to let you have time to look at this painting and try and make sense out of it. Modern art doesn't strike everyone immediately as much as representational art. But because he did it this way, with symbols and shapes, and laid it out on the canvas in such a way, You see the woman holding the baby on the far left side crying. You see the man on the ground who is dead, but he has a weapon in his hand at that time. You see the horses screaming. And carrying a lamp is this woman who I think, on top, who I think is supposed to represent justice or the right thing. And so she's holding a lamp and she's in shock at what she sees below her in this town. And in the upper right, you can see someone screaming in their home because they destroyed the homes. So I'm giving it to you the way you're not supposed to absorb a painting. You're supposed to just let it happen to you. And by the way I do that is I take breaths. It allows me to really appreciate music, art, dance. You guys see me in a movie theater, I'm going to have my eyes closed, and I'm going to take a deep breath and let it all out, and then I'll let the thing roll over me instead of me judging it every minute. You know, I just let the artist express themselves. That's how I made a living, and I recommend it. So Picasso's a hard one, but let me show you what happened. Here's Picasso in his studio. Quite a guy. There's a little video here. Slideshow. This is a news story about what happened. Okay, the painting went to Paris. It went to the Museum of Modern Art in New York, to Milan, Valentine Gallery, New York, San Francisco, misspelled, Harvard Art Museum, Stockholm, same painting, Belfast, South Africa. And look what they did in the USA. In Barcelona, these are people holding pieces up as a sign. And this is today, Czechoslovakia, they made a stamp out of it. Americans took parts of it and turned it, and it looks like someone in Spain. It was put on the wall of the United Nations. What happened? It created an entire anti-war movement, and it helped people to center themselves before World War II, to understand the dangers of fascism. Now, Picasso was not a political guy. He wasn't running around talking politics. He stayed in Paris during the occupation, which most of the artists left. They thought he was a traitor because he would let German officers come into his studio. But basically, he just didn't care. And he was such a celebrity that nobody was going to hurt him, and he made it all the way through the war. And yes, it's true, the German officers, who were educated people, came to visit the studio, and they just wanted to watch him paint. I mean, people were just amazed by him. I'm amazed by him. He's one of those guys like Ben Franklin who just, he was compelled. If he had a napkin here, he would be folded into a sculpture, or he'd be drawing on it. When you go to a Picasso museum in Spain or in Paris, you will see examples of how he's just, it's something spiritual that just takes over him from a child that he's compelled to produce. So we were very lucky to have him. Now, his wives and children were not lucky. I did an exhibition of Picasso work in San Francisco at one of my museums, and his kids came out, and the remaining family. And I tell you, before I went to work in this very elite world of really top fleet art museums, I hadn't really associated with these kind of people that are at the top. And I thought that we had it bad, and that if you had all the money and all the fame in the world, that you didn't have problems like that. But honey, I found out these people have the same problems anybody else has. Jealousy, rage, resentment, hunger, name a problem, jealous, name a problem, they've got them all. So that was a real learning experience for me. And Picasso was no different. Great artist, but quite a guy. And my next example is the artist Jean-Michel Basquiat, who is an American artist his mother was Puerto Rican, his father was from Haiti. So he became the darling of the art world. He started as a graffiti artist on the streets of New York. And his graffiti, I remember seeing it all over New York. It said S-A-M-O. And I used to say to my husband, when we were driving around, I'd say, that's Samo. What is this? Sambo? What are they trying to say? And it was Samo. And by that, he meant same old S-H. And so you'd find this mysteriously all over the city of New York, places. Samo. And people started to know, people in the art world and the cultural world were like, what is this? Why is this everywhere I go, all the cool places, it happens to be on that subway, or it happens to be on that street? Well, he got discovered in a certain way, and Andy Warhol really picked up on him, and the two of them became fast buddies and collaborated on paintings together. Today, Jean-Michel died at the age of 27, going on 28. And guess what he died of? Opioids.
Overdose.
Just like Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison. I mean, how many of them died at the same age of the same disease? And then they're still dying, so there's nothing different. There's nothing new in the sun. We're losing a lot of our best minds, okay? But what I want to say about him in this instance is that people thought he was a wild guy. The way he got to be big in the art world, they thought he was this uncultured, illiterate black teenage kid who didn't know anything. And his painting was just spontaneous because he was a natural, you know. But they don't know anything about him. He comes from a very middle-class home, and his mother took him to the Metropolitan Museum in New York every weekend because she knew he liked to do art and draw. And he studied, and he learned, and really internalized all the aspects of European art. So he really knew his stuff. But he also was a young black man operating in a very snooty society, so he had a way. So I'm going to let you look at some of his work. Here he is painting on the left in his studio. And this on the right, I think it's is it Vogue, or is it one of those really fancy, it's probably Andy Warhol's museum, which was called a magazine. What's the name of Andy Warhol's magazine?
Interview.
It may be the cover of Interview. But you can see some of his wall art because he was a graffiti artist. And here he is painting kind of like this. His hair is always crazy. Nowadays, guys wear this hair, but not in those days. Oh, incidentally, who was his girlfriend? Madonna.
Huh. Interesting.
Just so you know. This painting that he made, called Defacement. I'm going to let you look at it for a second. And on the left, you can see it on the wall at the Guggenheim Museum. In 2019, right before the pandemic, the Guggenheim did an exhibition of this painting. The painting was made on an artist named Keith Haring's wall. Oh, gosh. Keith Haring's wall. So they had to actually cut it out of the wall. And it went to his goddaughter. And so it had never been shown before. It's never been sold. But his paintings one of his paintings is the most expensive painting ever sold at auction. I think it's $175 million. That's who Jean-Michel Basquiat is. His paintings sell for way more than Andy Warhol's, but he was prolific. What's happening in Defacement? It's a pun. A young man named Michael, who was another graffiti artist, was killed by New York City subway cops because they claimed they saw him graffitiing on the wall, which is what those guys did. Somehow or other, they ended up shooting him dead. And it really upset Basquiat and the other arts community, the Warhols, the Madonnas, Keith Haring. They all had fundraisers for him, and they painted things for him. They all painted things in his honor. This is Jean-Michel's painting, Defacement, and it's a pun. When you're graffitiing the wall, you're accused of defacing the wall, right? And the way the cops shot him in the face, it blew his face off. So the joke is, it's not a joke, but this is the black man in the middle getting his head beat up by two cops on either side. And the thumbprints with blood, and the blood on the baton, the looks on their faces, the badges, the stars, and he has no face. He's just a black thing. Now, when this was at the Guggenheim, people were saying, isn't it great, his use of color and his use of line and all that. But when I read Basquiat's paintings, I see black history, a person who really knows their black history, and you have to look carefully and you'll see it. It's all over the place. So I just have a couple more. He's an artivist. And the people that he was around had no idea. And the people that pay $175 million for his paintings, I don't think they get it either. I think they're just the way it looks. But these are three police violence ones. The one on the left is called The Irony of a Negro Policeman. Who's the guy that just got killed by black cops in Memphis? I forget the names after a while. It was black cops that did it. And so this is the irony of a Negro policeman, is what it's called. And his left foot is a paw. But there's almost an N there, so it's his paw, he's an animal, but also he's a pawn of the system. I'm explaining these in words, but these are not for words. The one in the center, you see that one? And the one on the right, that's one of the most famous of his paintings, one of the most famous. And it's called La Jara, which is the Puerto Rican New York slang for the pigs or the cops. Anybody here understand the word when I said it? Somebody raise their hand. La Jara. And that's who he's representing here. Look at it, the skull face. I'm sorry, you're seeing my cursor. The skull face. And when Basquiat was a young man, he got sick with something. He had to stay in bed with polio or one of those kind of rheumatic fever. And during that time, his mother gave him a copy of the book Gray's Anatomy, which is what every medical student looks at to learn about the body. And he poured through Gray's Anatomy and memorized every bone in every part of the body. So you're going to see a lot of skulls, a lot of bones, and they represent different things to him. So next time you have a chance to look at Basquiat, take a harder look. The third artist I'm going to highlight is one that I can't talk about that much here, but her name is Fabiana Rodriguez. And she is an immigrant from South America. Her parents came. She was raised in Oakland, California. And she says that she was greatly inspired by what she learned about the Black Panther Party. And she wasn't, I'm sorry.
We're big fans of her, sorry.
Me too, I have one on my wall at home. And she's also an awesome woman.
Yes.
Awesome. But one of the things that she represents now is things having to do with environmental action, but also immigration. So the butterfly is the monarch butterfly, which those of you who know about the monarch butterflies, it summers up in North America, but it winters down in Oaxaca, Mexico. So it's a symbol of the people who would go back and forth between Mexico and North America, the El Norte. So she's representing that, and you see a lot of butterflies in her work. Okay, I only have a few minutes left, unfortunately. But
20.
Well, I got a lot to say, and you won't get it all, but you can ask questions after. I'm going to talk about the Great Migration, because this is what created the entire reason for being of the Black Panther Party. This is the Great Migration 2.0. The first one, people went up north from down south, those states. But in 1940-41, a lot of my daddy said, a lot of the white boys were sent off to war. And their women went to work as Rosie the Riveters. But this was a chance for African Americans in the South to go west and to work in defense industry jobs right just next to a white person. So these are people who were rural people. And you can see the birthplace. My family's from Arkansas. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale and all these guys, they're all from Stokely Carmichael, Arkansas. Huey Newton, Louisiana. So we don't see people from a lot of the states that maybe some people here, well, no, in Arizona, it's the same kind of people stopped on the way. But it was World War II that really brought them in. I know you don't have time for this, but Langston Hughes wrote a wonderful poem, and I'm going to play him reading it.
I pick up my life and take it with me, and I put it down in Chicago, Detroit, Buffalo, Harlem, any place that is north and east and not Dixie. I pick up my life and take it on the train to Los Angeles, Bakersfield, Seattle, Oakland, Salt Lake, any place that is north and west and not south. I am fed up with Jim Crow laws, people who are cruel and afraid, who lynch and run, who are scared of me and me of them. So I pick up my life and take it away on a one-way ticket. Gone up north, gone out west, gone.
I like the way he pronounces that, gone. I thought you might like to hear his voice, because that's what he sounded like. We hear his poems, we know about his poetry, but we don't know about him. So he was talking about the Great Migration. These people were refugees. Every time I say that, my family were refugees, people go to me and like, no, they're not. Your people can't be refugees. They're not from Europe. No, they were refugees. And they came, and you ask those old folks their stories, why they came, they're refugees of domestic terrorism. This is what happened to Oakland, California, and a lot of cities. In 1940, there's only 3% black people. By 1950, there's 12.4%, and it grows until 1980. And then it goes down. 2020 is the last census, where it's 20% today. Projections are in 2030, there will only be 18%, and by 2040, there will only be 10% African Americans in the city. You see this in Washington, D.C., you see it in Brooklyn, you see it in, you're going to be seeing it more in Chicago and Atlanta, Austin. This is happening. There's another Great Migration 3.0, and I think I'm part of that. Moving to Philadelphia as I did from Oakland. My daughter and son both moved to New York City. And my daughter's still in Brooklyn, my son is in Washington, D.C. They moved to the East Coast. We hear about the Black Panther Party and we think they came up with that, but they were not the original Black Panthers. Wait till you see who the original Black Panthers were. It was the Army 761st Tank Battalion in World War II in Europe, and if I could blow this picture more of them on, you can see those are African American men standing around like African American men on top of that tank, he's like this. General Patton, they didn't use them as soldiers, in all of the American wars. Okay, they weren't used. They were the grave diggers, they were the mess cooks, they did that kind of work. And they didn't want to give them any fancy machinery. You've heard about the Tuskegee Airmen. The thing was that they didn't trust them with an expensive plane, that they would crash it. And they didn't want them to have weapons because the theory was, and you can read all this yourself in their words, that as soon as the fight started, they would run. Because, in the movies, they get these big eyes, and they go, ooh, the ghost, and they run away. So there was the stereotypes went that far into our government that they believed these guys couldn't fight and wouldn't fight. But this particular tank battalion was called in at almost the end of World War II in 1944 because they had lost so many of the white soldiers. Now, they never integrated the Army until much later, but this black company had been trained and they were ready to go and they wanted to go, just like the Tuskegee Airmen. So they went to Europe. They did a lot of things, but I want to make one point here. They were the soldiers that liberated the Buchenwald and Dachau concentration camps. And the people that were in those camps freely talk about it. Here we were in the situation there was no hope, and then the Americans were coming. And the Americans came and we looked at them, and they all had the black faces. And they gave us gum, and they gave us, chocolate, and how much it meant to them. There are towns in Europe where every year they do memorials to the black soldiers. But did you learn about any of this in school? Nope. But these guys are the ones who liberated. And you don't believe me? Look it up yourself. They're the ones. So I wanted to show you one thing. Their symbol that they chose was the Black Panther. And they had this painted on the side of their tanks. And their motto was, come out fighting. Because remember, they had been held back from the war for so long. They wanted to come out into the middle of the war and fight. Now, I have these pictures here. Anybody recognize the guy down here in the lower right? You should recognize him.
Robinson.
Jackie Robinson. Who said that? Jackie Robinson. He was a member of that company. And here he is running like only a 5-sport athlete an Olympian from UCLA. Look how that right foot is off the ground, running with his rifle. I've got pictures of him doing all the 5 sports. He was the perfect soldier, but he got himself kicked out of this platoon. He wasn't used to this racist environment coming out of the way he did out of Pasadena, California, and going to UCLA. All of a sudden, they throw him in an all-black regiment, and they start giving him orders and things, and he's. So he didn't make it. They actually court-martialed him out of the Army. But then they reinstated him, but they sent him someplace else. Of course, he wasn't supposed to get killed anyway, but they didn't know that he was going to become what he became, so thank God he lived. The next one. How many minutes do I have?
You have, I think I should have put it up, 10 minutes.
Sorry, folks. I won't even get up. I will get to the other Black Panthers that you've heard of. But as far as what they did later on and how the influence was, I might not get to that unless you ask me. So anybody know about Lowndes County, Alabama? 1, 2. We went there. And I didn't know until the Black National Park Ranger got on our tour bus and told us, this is the home of the Black Panthers. I said, this little nowhere, Lowndes County, Alabama is the middle of nowhere between Montgomery and Selma. There's nothing. And there's a national park visitor center there, all by itself in the midst of all this. It looks like nothing, but it's cotton fields. They flattened all the hills, and turned everything into cotton. So what happened was the people in Lowndes County were rural people. They were sharecroppers. And they heard about all this stuff that was going on in Montgomery, and they had all these college students marching there and trying to get voting rights, and especially that bus boycott, and they thought that sounded great. And so they said, we want to do that here in Lowndes County too. We're going to register to vote too. So a young man on the right-hand side talking to an old man sitting on the ledge, on the fence there, named Stokely Carmichael, had been a volunteer. And he was with an organization called SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And he helped them. They wanted to set up their own political party because the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, none of them would allow black folks to vote. As a matter of fact, there were 0 black voters in Lowndes County, Alabama at that time, when there had been 80% of black people voting immediately after emancipation. Everybody signed up to vote right after emancipation, but what happened that they went from 80% to 0? Well, happened in Lowndes County again. They started trying to register to vote, and what happened was they were sharecroppers. So when their bosses heard that they were out there causing trouble, like those niggers in Montgomery, that Martin Luther King, they kicked them off of their property. They were living in whatever little houses. You can see what this little man's house looks like. Living in whatever houses they had. They were living on other land. And remember, as a sharecropper, you have to buy your seed and all your equipment from the owner of the land all year long. And then you pay for it all out of the proceeds of what you sell at the end of the year. You get cheated a lot. But these folks, this was all they knew. Their folks never left Lowndes County after enslavement. They didn't go out west, out north. They stayed in Dixie. So they got kicked out, and they lost their jobs. And they had nowhere to go, and they had no money. So they set up a tent city, and Stokely helped them with that. And they lived there for almost 2 years. I think it was up to 50 people, families living there in this tent city, clustered together for safety, just like the contraband camps right after the Civil War. What was the problem? Well, the folks who didn't want them to vote didn't like them living out there, loitering, and what do they call it? Trespass, loiter, all those laws that were invented in the Jim Crow days to keep black people, if you weren't working, they could arrest you and then they could put you to work. So anyway, in Lowndes County, the folks there, they were being attacked. The Klan could ride up easily on them. So in the South, and this is what I want to say about Black Panthers, in the South, anybody here has family from the South? No? Yes? Do they know how to shoot guns? Same as the West, right? You learn early to shoot guns for hunting. And shooting guns is a natural part of who you are. So I told you about how all these young people in Oakland, California were fresh. Their parents were fresh from the South. And maybe they had moved as children. So they knew about guns were not a strange thing to them. It wasn't foreign. They were used to having, especially rifles, long guns that you would use, that you learn how to shoot. So to protect themselves, they decided to start their own political party. The white party represented itself with a white rooster. And so they cast about thinking, what do they want to be? How can we be? We want to have our own party. Because people were illiterate. So when you went into the voting booth, they would have an icon of who you were voting for. Say, Tani Sanchez, she's a Black Panther. And I don't know your name, but you are a white rooster. So the people there, they could just push the Black Panther or the white rooster. That's how they vote. These weren't literate people. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get to the Black Panthers. So they came up with this idea of a Black Panther, and they weren't sure about it, but the slide is missing, but a young woman who had graduated from Clark College in Atlanta, which is now Clark University, part of the Atlanta University complex, their mascot is a panther. So she went back on a vacation back home and came back and brought the drawing back. It's on one of these slides. This is the drawing you should use. So they tried to make this drawing themselves, and this became their theme. One man, one vote. They did not call themselves the Black Panther. They called themselves the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. They eventually blended in with Democratic Party. They ended up voting. They ended up becoming elected officials themselves. And now there's a national park there. So, okay, back to Black Panther. What was the Black Panther before the Black Panthers? This is what the first edition, where the first time the Black Panther appeared, T'Challa appeared in a comic. July 1966. Jack Kirby and Stan Lee said that they just thought it up themselves they thought, why is it we created all these characters and we never created a black one? They've interviewed them both separately, and each one says they're the one who thought of it and not the other one. And then they say it just came to them one day. Okay? Had nothing to do with the army. It had nothing to do with the people in Alabama. It was just something that appeared to them. And so they created this T'Challa African character out of the goodness of their hearts. So we're going to talk, now I'm going to start my last 5 minutes to talk about Black Panther Party for Self-Defense from Oakland. 7 minutes. Oh, okay. You saw that the comic book came out in July 1966. October 1966 is when the Black Panther Party started. And it's 2 college students at the community college in Oakland called Merritt College. Every year, the school celebrated something called Pioneer Day. You might have that here in Arizona, where you learn about the different people that came over in wagons, and they were the pioneers, and you learn their names, and you memorize their dates and where they went. And these 2 guys, they didn't look like that then, they were kids. These 2 guys said, wait a minute, there's nobody black in here. Weren't there any black pioneers? And then they said, you know, we need to start a club just for us black students. So they started a club. It became the very first black student union anywhere in the country, this club that they started. While they're in the club, they said, you know, with this Pioneer Day thing, we need to have black history. We need to be taught black history. We need to have a black history class. And so these guys are pretty much go-getters, as you can see. They got the very first black history class taught at Merritt College. But then there was a young man that was killed by police in Oakland. You know, when you study American history and you look at all the riots of the past, every time it's always some person, some young person who's unarmed that gets killed, and whoever did it never goes to trial. And if they do, they're let off in an hour or whatever. And this goes back, I mean, I'm studying American history back to the beginning, and this is a trend. And so each generation discovers it, and they think they're the first ones, and they get angry about it. But these guys discovered it in 1966. Stokely Carmichael came out from Alabama, from SNCC, and he told them about this Black Panther Party they'd started there. And they said, we like that idea. We want to do something like that. So these guys who carried guns, police were beating up. You see this rapid increase of black people suddenly in Oakland, boom. But it wasn't just Southern blacks that moved to West. Southern whites did too. And a lot of them went into police force and being sheriffs. And so there was already a dynamic of pressure, and people were being harassed all the time in the neighborhoods. And so they said, what we're going to do is we're going to watch what the police are doing, and we're going to bring our guns. So they knew exactly how far away to stand, and the guns weren't loaded, but they knew exactly how far away to stand from the cops to be legal. And they would stand there with these things on their shoulders, and they'd watch when the cops encountered someone, just watching. Then they set up programs. They said, we need to do more than this. We need to do survival for revolution. There's going to be a revolution one day, and we want our people to survive long enough to have that revolution. So they went to Sacramento, the state capital, and they wore these outfits. Why? Because in San Francisco, the weather that we have, leather jackets are perfect. You have the fog in the morning, you take it off. Any other coat is too thick, but the leather keeps the fog out and keeps the chill out. And then you can take it off once the sun comes out and the fog burns away. Oh, okay. That's my time signal. They were destroyed by the FBI COINTELPRO, an infiltration campaign, and they used art to do that with. Their very first action was installing a stoplight on the corner of 55th and Market Streets, which is where, in these cities, you know what happened, where the freeways are, right? They were all built over black communities that had run down. So what they would do is they build the freeways, eminent domain, they take that property, which nobody was going to fight them for, okay? They could take that property by eminent domain, and then they'd build freeways and highways above them. And that's what happened at 55th, and it kind of cut the black community in half and took out lots of homes. Imagine a 4-lane freeway, how many homes that takes down. So there had been an elementary school, Santa Fe Elementary, in the neighborhood, but once they built that freeway, there was an exit, and people would come right off the exit and they'd speed down the street. And they tried. 2 organizations, the Anti-Poverty Center and the Black Panther Party, a year after they formed, less than a year after they formed, they went to the city council meetings, they showed up, and the city council told them they could not put up a light at that intersection for more than a year and a half. It would take that long to get a light put up. So what did they do? They came out with their guns on their shoulders, and they went out whenever the kids tried to cross the street, or a senior, they'd walk out and they'd stop the traffic. I don't care how fast you're going on the freeway. You see these guys standing there in a line with their outfits on and guns and doing like this, they stopped it and personally watched each child walk across the street. And that is what got the city of Oakland less than 2 months later to suddenly put up this light. And when you go to Oakland now, you see this sign as part of the commemoration of the very first action they did. Oh gosh. I'm gonna do it for you. This is a very rare footage of the Black Panthers in 1968, and you won't see this anywhere else. Is the sound going to come through? That's me videoing up. Lyrics. The thief was the devil, just how they really was told. To steal a song from people, you know he really was bold. The truth about the whole thing sure had never been told. Even stole a name, which was better than gold. But I saw it all in someone's head on a roll. They're trying to steal the music children that we let get old. Trying to learn the wisdom that their mind can't hold. Time is up, we had enough, now we got control. They don't need this rhythm cause it's muscle lost soul. They're not the best band in the world, but the kids like it. Listen, you got to get that starchy line out of your hat. Wigs and straightening combs ain't gonna get you nowhere. I know I'm stepping on some folks' toes, I just don't care. Now saying the thing you ought to know, it's got to be fair. Oh, Lord.
This is no picnic in Oakland. It is a political rally organized by the Black Panthers. On this Sunday in August 1968, their purpose is to have one of their leaders, Huey Newton, released from jail. When they sing Free Huey. When they dance, they clench their fists. The panther was chosen as their symbol. It is a beautiful black animal which never attacks, but defends itself ferociously.
And if you stay a while, you can see a little bit more of that video. Emory Douglas became the, oops. Okay.
Give it a minute.
I can't finish, but I can do a little bit more. What the Panthers did was, this is actually the typing that Huey P. Newton did. Hey, there's some misspelling on there. Was a college student, okay? But they came up with a 10-point plan. This was not just some group that wanted to destroy things and burn things. They never were into the burning, but they came up with an actual 10-point plan, and everything makes sense here. But what I want to show you in terms of the art, Emory Douglas was a young man who had learned the printing trade in prison. Little boy prison, juvenile. He was seen to have some talent, so they let him apprentice in the print shop. So he learned about printing and he learned about graphic design as a kid in prison. So what I wanted you to see in that video is that these are children. The people in the Black Panther Party are children. They're kids, they're teenagers. Just like the people who went in the Montgomery bus boycott, they were all children. They're teenagers and college students, and that's what we have here. So what Emory Douglas did is he drew a cartoon for each one of the 10 things because, as they will say, and later, we're dealing with a non-literate population. But we want to get the message across. So how do you do that? Art. So he made these cartoons, and they were very popular, but that's how they passed along the information. You got to kick me out. These are some of the Survival for Revolution programs. Here's Maya Angelou in the middle here, teaching. They started a school, it's one of the things. And here she is teaching at the school. Maya Angelou went to my high school in San Francisco. She's older than me. Much older she was, but still, it was a time and a place. You had to be there. But they started ambulance service. They started the free breakfast program for kids. They gave free groceries out. 10,000 free bags of groceries on one day. They got people to donate. And they called it survival. They had the Black Community Survival Conference. So the idea was that people had to survive, and they weren't going to survive otherwise. This slide was supposed to scroll, that you could see. I'm going to have to do it manually. My fingers aren't very good, but you get to see some of the programs that they started. And this is why people in Oakland know them. Still. They didn't get the TV version. They got free plumbing and maintenance. They got free shoes. They got GED classes. GYN clinic. Youth Institute. This Intercommunal Youth Institute is what became the Oakland Community School that you saw Maya Angelou speaking in. Her name is not Maya Angelou, you know. Marguerite. But she chose it. There's more, but for some reason it's not. Anyway, it goes to 65 different things that they started. And this is how the actual community of West Oakland, these people who had become impoverished. See, once the war is over, they don't really need you like they did before. Once the automobile plant closes down, the shipyards are no longer building ships for the Navy, suddenly you're out here, and what are you going to do now? So, sorry, folks. I'm just going to, these are out of order. The Black Lives Matter program also started in Oakland, and I'm skipping past what I need to be talking about, but might as well see the slide since it's here. This is the artist. Oscar Grant died on New Year's Eve of turning into 2009. He was killed by transit police, just like the young man in New York City. He was killed by transit police, but what's changed? Do we need to walk around with guns and watch the police? No. Everybody on that subway car pulled out their cell phone, and they all videoed it. Some of them did it on Facebook Live. And then as soon as they got home, they put it up on their Twitter, they put it up on their Facebook and whatever they were using in 2009. And before the next morning, everybody saw what happened to Oscar Grant. They saw it with their own eyes, the way people saw George Floyd and were shocked. This happened in Oakland, and it was 2009, and it was the beginning of cell phone vigilance. This is not supposed to be in this order either. This is me and my kids protesting. I'm carrying a sign my daughter made for me at the Women's March with a quote from Angela Davis. I am no longer, this reminds me of you, sir. What's your name again, gentlemen?
Behind you.
What's your name again? Yeah, it's you.
James Christopher.
You said something that I thought was very striking when you said, be yourself or else I won't know who you are. And this reminds me of the kind of thing Angela Davis would have said. I'm no longer accepting things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. So before I leave, I'm going to show you two women. I want to talk about Panther women a lot. Here are the women. I don't want to talk about the boys anymore. The women, the majority of the party ended up being women. Who fixed those free breakfasts for the kids? Who taught the classes at the free school? Okay? It was the women. And they weren't acknowledged. There was a certain amount of misogyny going on. But these are four women that I highlighted. I think you should know their names if you don't already. Joan Tarika Lewis was the first woman to join the Black Panther Party. She was a teenage girl. And she came into the office and said, I want to join. And they kind of laughed at her. Why? She kept coming, kept coming, kept coming. This is her sitting in the famous Huey Newton chair. And today, she is a teacher. She's a classical violinist, and she teaches kids for free violin classes. Kathleen Cleaver, the wife of Eldridge Cleaver.
The party has a rational program and a rational explanation for the many confusing things that are happening around this country. So whereas they might invite some speakers who rant and rave and talk about hate white people, burn, kill, etc., and they can't really understand it, they can't isolate it, the Black Panther Party will give them an ideological perspective and separate the institutions from the citizens, the government from the people, and point out the institutions, in particular the PIG, the police department, the educational system, the economic system, to be attacked. And do not attack the individuals because of the color of their skin.
So anybody tells you it was a hate whiting movement, it was never a hate whiting movement. The next woman I want to show you, where is she? I know you guys have got to go. Here's Elaine Brown. She ran for Oakland City Council. Right now, she's a builder. She builds homes, affordable homes for people. But she was a beauty queen. I don't have any beauty queen pictures, but here she is with her afro here. She and Bobby Seale realized that they wanted to go the political route. They didn't really want to tear the country down. They wanted to hold office. They wanted to do voter registration and get people to vote. So the voter registration and their campaigns that they ran got so many people registered to vote, so much so that the next mayoral election, the first black mayor was elected, Lionel Wilson, to Oakland. And he knows, and everyone there knows, that there was no way he would have gotten elected. He was a conservative guy, but he wouldn't have ever gotten elected if the Black Panthers hadn't been out there doing nice things for people in the community and putting out a voter registration form at the nice things. So Elaine Brown actually sang, and I don't want to, I'll play 2 seconds. Oh.
Tell me that the sun belongs to you and should surround you.
Okay, that's enough.
When I turn to look.
She has better songs than that, but she did a whole album called Seize the Time, and look at the picture of the woman with her thing there. But I'm talking about using music to get across your message. And the kids in those days, the youth in those days, that was groovy music. That was like, seriously, that was like cool music in the late 60s, early 70s. So they used what would get to the kids, things that were not writing that you had to read, and music that the kids liked, and then the fashion. I am so sorry, Tani. Here's a Panther youth from that same video.
Daily. Like I said before, we are organizing the community, going into different people's homes, politically educating them, telling them exactly what is going on, not only here in Oakland, but in America and throughout the world. See, many black people are not aware of what is going on in America, or what is going on in South Africa, or over there in France, for instance, We organize, since the black community is not a reading community, we talk to them, show them examples. In our paper, we have pictures, so they can see what is going on. And then after they learn what is going on in the black community, then they can step forth and try to change themselves.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So they spoke well. The French people didn't bother them. They weren't afraid of them. Should have been, but I'm so sorry. The Black Panthers have their own funk band. Anybody here know anything about Marxist political theory? You know who the lumpen are? Say it.
I said they're like the proletariat.
They're the proletariat. They're the pawns of the society. So they call themselves the lumpen. And here they are doing funk music concerts. I don't know if I have it. Oh, yeah, I do. Play 10 seconds of this. This is Free Bobby. Remember you had the Free Huey? They all went to jail. Free Huey, Free Angela, Free Bobby, Free Eldridge. You can imagine them here on the stage. Okay, that's enough. Okay, so you get the idea. But they had their own funk band. And that's been recently discovered, these records. I got to find this one for you. This was Angela Davis. This is how she became an icon. Watch these 2 minutes of an interview with David Susskind, interviewing her, asking her a question. Well, they always ask them the same questions. Are you advocating violence? Do the Black Panthers advocate violence? And she says,
you ask me, whether I approve of violence. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all. Whether I approve of guns. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Some very, very good friends of mine were killed by bombs that were planted by racists. I remember from the time I was very small, I remember the sounds of bombs exploding across the street, our house shaking. I remember my father having to have guns at his disposal at all times because of the fact that at any moment we might expect to be attacked. The man who was at that time in complete control of the city government, his name was Bull Connor, would often get on the radio and make statements like, niggers have moved into a white neighborhood, we better expect some bloodshed tonight. And sure enough, there would be bloodshed. After the 4 young girls who lived, one of them lived next door to me. I was very good friends with the sister of another one. My sister was very good friends with all 3 of them. My mother taught one of them in her class. My mother, in fact, when the bombing occurred, one of the mothers of one of the young girls called my mother and said, can you take me down to the church to pick up Carol? We heard about the bombing and I don't have my car. And they went down and what did they find? They found limbs and heads strewn all over the place. And then after that, in my neighborhood, all of the men organized themselves into an armed patrol. They had to take their guns and patrol our community every night because they did not want that to happen again. I mean, that's why when someone asks me about violence, I just find it incredible. Because what it means is that the person who's asking that question has absolutely no idea what Black people have gone through, what Black people have experienced in this country since the time the first Black person was kidnapped from the shores of Africa.
This is striking to me in a fashion way because when she talks, her afro is shaking. Also, watching the difference in her demeanor when she remembers her childhood trauma. These young people had been traumatized, and their parents had been traumatized. So, you wonder why they're angry. It's generation, what do they call it now? Generational trauma, intergenerational trauma, and nothing you can do about it. How did she become an icon? Her photos, that fro. Actually, there's music that goes along to this, but I won't play it. I'll play it. She was a cover girl. Showing up to her court appearances. This is Vogue, incidentally.
I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all your chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things that I should say.
Still in vogue, still on the New York Times Magazine, still on the cover of Vanity Fair. Artists were inspired by her, and her image appeared everywhere. It still does. I just put a few from some of the many. Thank you. Some of the many art exhibitions about how artists were inspired by her. And the iconic fro. Here's a kid with a T-shirt on. Marchers holding a sign with that afro. Artists just glommed onto it. And so she became an icon, visual icon. She's a professor. She's a PhD. She's a professor at the University of California at Santa Cruz and has been for, I may guess, almost 30 years now. This is her at a Black Lives Matter protest. Okay, now let me turn this off.
Each generation has passed on that impulse to fight for freedom to the next.
This was 4 days ago.
And oftentimes, even when we thought the flames had been extinguished, we have a Black Lives Matter movement erupting. And so I think that we should acknowledge the phenomenal quality of Black culture, Black political culture, Black music, because where have we learned to cultivate that impulse for freedom? I mean, that is the reason why we observe Black history. You know, Black history is not just because there are Black people in, various parts of the world. It's about what Black people have offered to people all over the world. And that is the desire, the cultivation of the desire to keep on struggling for freedom. It is in the art. It is the very heart of the music. And that is why Black music is known by people all over this planet.
She's expressing my thesis here. Panther style.
It now means comrade in the political sense. This is the Black Panther style. Black leather, black berets, black sunglasses. Return to African dress, to natural hairdo. And promotion of women to the political and military life of the party.
This is Lake Merritt, the lake in the middle of the city of Oakland. The teenagers, you hear the little voices? These are kids practicing on the side. The afro or natural hairstyle became an important part of I'm sorry.
Looking out on the morning rain, I used to feel so uninspired. And when I knew I had to face another day, Lord, it made me feel so tired. Before the day I met you, life was so unkind. You're the key to my peace of mind. But you make me feel, you make me feel, you make me feel like a natural woman.
Okay, keep watching.
When my show was in the lost and found,
Who do you recognize?
you came along to claim it. I didn't know just what was wrong with me. that you're a woman.
Madonna.
Oh, baby, what you done to me? What you done to me?
Bob Ross.
It feels so
And
good inside. And just wanna be
Halloween. It becomes a Halloween costume. That's me. At a protest with my good friend. I guess I could stop there, but gee, gosh. You want me to stop now? Yes. Okay, I will do that. I'll do that. Okay, I showed you the style, but I didn't show you the culmination of it. I could scroll through some more. Oh, I gotta find Beyonce. What about Tupac? Oh, I've got Tupac for days on here. Because Tupac's mother was a Panther who was pregnant with him the whole time she was in prison. She's released, and less than a month later, she gives birth to him. And so he's raised on the run with a Femi. And again, this is the pride of Oakland, Tupac. Everybody loves Tupac, but Oakland really loves Tupac and his mother. They worship all the mothers of everybody that's been killed, too. So in terms of Michael Brown, it's Michael Brown's mother who's invited to speak. That's the Black Lives Matter way. It started by 3 black women in Oakland, and the idea is to honor the mothers and have something. It's like it's not like an award for the mothers, but it's a chance to commemorate the pain of those mothers. And they call them the mothers of the movement. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find Beyonce, and it looks like I have to, because everything fell out of order, it puts me in a funny space. Oh, here we go. You want to see this, right?
Information. Okay, ladies, now let's get information. Prove to me you got some coordination. You just might be a black Bill Gates in the making. Get it, Alabama, Mama, Louisiana. You mix that Negro with that Creole, make a Texas Bama. I like my baby hair with baby hair and afro. Don't know protected by nostrils. And all this money, but they never take the country I've been. I got hot sauce in my bag. I see it, I want it. I stuck yellow on it. I dream it.
There's the formation.
I grind till I
like the teenagers.
Swirl all my haters. Avocado, alligators. Burrito, zero, Rambo, no jitter. Sometimes I go on. I go hard. Take what's mine. I'm a star. 'Cause I play. Okay, ladies, now let's get information.
Okay. You see the girls, Beyonce with the girls lined up behind. Doesn't it look like the drills that you saw? And these costumes, people commented on the short pants, but I was a teenager in high school in San Francisco then. My senior prom date, well, I'll tell you that last. We wore hot pants. And we wore mini skirts. And you saw the pictures of the girls wearing their mini skirts. They weren't wearing hot pants on the video that you saw, but we wore hot pants and mini skirts. And so this costume makes, it makes sense. Now what I want to show you is the girl on the right there, on the bottom, that's holding the sign. These are the dancers. And the young lady there with the sign is actually from Oakland, California, that particular dancer. And a young man named Mario Woods had been killed by the police earlier that week in San Francisco. So she, after the show, handmade this sign, Justice for Mario Woods, and she's holding it backstage. It's not a part of the show, but she and her girlfriends did this, and they put it up on and they put Black Lives and SB 50, So it's an act. She's from Oakland, so that's part of being from Oakland. You're an activist. So here's the Oscar Grant thing, and who's that to the right on the top right? Yeah. Michael B. Jordan. What do they call them? A snack?
He's a whole menu.
He's a whole menu. So this is actually the real Oscar Grant. He's playing a part. This is him on the train station. But the local artists get involved when something like that happens, and it energizes them. So these are artists that I know. These are just some of the pictures, some of it. But here's I Am Oscar Grant. This became the beginning of Black Lives Matter. I Am Oscar Grant. Oh, Zendaya is one of ours, totally. Oakland Public Schools all the way. She's wearing a Tupac t-shirt here, and she's wearing a Tupac t-shirt there. She's wearing an afro, and we don't laugh at her for wearing her afro because she's copying her aunties, and there's pictures of her with her aunties. Okay, folks, I'm just gonna pretend like I'm done, except for this opening scene, the ending scene of Black Panther movie. Now, the reason I showed you the Oscar Grant and Michael B. Jordan, there's a young Oakland man named Ryan Coogler, who it turns out is a distant cousin of mine. Distant. And Ryan just won another award. They won all the awards at the NAACP Image Awards for the new movie, Wakanda Forever. But Ryan Coogler was going to school at USC. He went to college down there and wanted to study film. And he's like the only black student and one of a couple of black students. And an actor by the name of Forrest Whitaker comes to visit the class, and Ryan's so excited. So Ryan says, well, young man, what do you want to do? He says, I want to do something about my hometown, because Oscar Grant this and Oscar Grant that. I mean, our kids really, Oscar Grant was a regular guy. A lot of people knew him. And that night on the BART train, everybody was partying, and in a multicultural way. I mean, it was a fun night, and all of a sudden, this happened. So he said, I want to do something. So Forrest Whitaker helped him get the money to make the movie Fruitvale Station. If you haven't seen the film Fruitvale Station, look it up. It was Ryan Coogler's first film. He had enough money to make it because of Forrest Whitaker's involvement. And it was so good that because of that first movie, he was given all the money he wanted to shoot this. It's the final scene of Black Panther movie. Back in Oakland.
Poor, wacky vision, cloudy, sleepwalking. Poor, wacky vision, cloudy, sleepwalking. All them trials and tribulations, belly heavens and the rain.
I'm sorry, something happened here, but it wasn't what I wanted to happen, but it's all right. So the movie ends. It begins in Oakland. That's where the uncle and the cousin, I forget all the characters' names, you guys remember the characters' names, are in the apartment, and they're, things are happening, and we find out where the whole setting of the story. Now, Stan Lee did not write the story in Oakland, California, but Ryan Coogler put it there. We have a bunch of other filmmakers that have made films. I want to recommend a movie, Sorry to Bother You, by Boots Riley, whose father was the main lawyer for the Panthers. His group, The Coup, is wonderful, and the movie Sorry to Bother You is great, but I've got some songs by Boots Riley that will tell you all about how he feels about Tupac, and he's like a brother Tupac. Zendaya, Ryan Coogler, Mahershala Ali, I have him in here in the slides. Somebody asked for Tupac. Okay. What's happened is Tupac went all around the world. His image. So you can go to any country. Sierra Leone, up there on the upper right. Here's China on the upper left. Here's a special tribute to him with Snoop Dogg. This one at the bottom is in Brazil, Sao Paulo. So when I say from Oakland to the world, that's my thesis here. It's more than that. I'm sorry, I'm repeating slides. Then, this whole thing about the tattoos. You would not believe how many people have Tupac tattooed on their bodies in strange places. Because he had a tattoo. He had 30 tattoos, and I think people try to get 30 tattoos themselves. It's not that rare. There's a lot of people with Tupac tattoos. His one said, Thug Life. And the thug doesn't mean what you think it does. It's the letters symbolizing something. But here's someone's arm. That's another arm. An arm with Dear Mama lyrics written on it. This down here, you recognize her? Rihanna. Apparently her name is Rihanna. Her mother, the name was Anna, and Ree is in front. It's Rihanna. It's not Rihanna. You can't see what she's doing, but she's doing the closed fist. She has Thug Life on her fingers. So I guess that's That's it. Embodied rituals are this. And it doesn't come from the Black Panthers. They got it from other places. Different wars and different times. These are different representations. And then here is, it's got used for other movements. And here's Black Lives Matter. Kids in Oakland learn how to do this. They always have. Ever since I was young, they teach the kids how to say Black Power, baby, Black Power. The berets, they didn't invent berets. Spanish Civil War, and then Che Guevara picked up on it. They didn't invent. And I know the French read, but for them, but as a revolutionary outfit, the leather jackets. Here's the cover of Vogue. All right, so folks, I lost the entire presentation this afternoon. I would have had nothing to show you, but I thank Dr. Sanchez for her patience in waiting for me to try and get things fixed. Thank you.
This was an absolutely wonderful, inspiring presentation, and thank you so much for this. Okay, one of our organizers, Beth, has this whole schedule, and I'm supposed to have done a moderation and Q&A. So I do have a question for the people who organize this, Amanda and Beth. We have a reception that actually started 15 minutes ago.
Oh, reception. If I'd known that, I would have shut up.
So what I want to know from the organizers and from the people who are here, do you want to do maybe a really short 5-minute Q&A, or do you just want to get to the food and talk to Pamela Mays McDonald on your own? So let me know what can work. Can we do the reception? Can we? And Dr. Zaninga, we're supposed to be going to a dinner. I mean, you help me out here.
Our place closes at 9.
The place closes at 9. So we got 1 hour, huh? Okay, so what's the consensus of, well, first of all, can we do this? Can the reception wait or not? All right, then I'm going to ask you, do you want to take a few minutes for public Q&A, or do you want to start to mingle and talk to her one-on-one? How many people want to do a public Q&A? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many people want to mingle and eat? 1. It looks like the same amount of people.
Questions and then let's eat.
Okay, I'm going to take 2 questions. 2 questions. So think really hard. If you have a good question, give it to me now. She's first. All right, stand up. Repeat your question. I'm actually going to repeat it. But.
So my mother was actually alive during this time period, and the version of the Black Panther she saw was the one depicted in the media, which was very much like, look at these scary people, you should be terrified. And I was wondering how much of that narrative was seeded by the same forces that were trying to stomp them out was CONTELPRO, and how much of it was just, there's this new thing and I'm afraid of it, and I'm in control, and I'm high up in the media, so I'm going to tell everyone to be afraid of this too.
Okay, I'm going to repeat your question. Your mother was living during that time period. Her version of the Black Panthers was a stereotypical movie version. And you're asking how much of that imagery was derived from the government, the CONTELPRO movement trying to destroy the Panthers.
Anybody seen the movie Judas and the Black Messiah? There's another movie called The Picture Taker that's out. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a new one. They were infiltrated so much. Guys who had gotten picked up for some kind of crime, the FBI agents would say, okay, you're going to do time unless we want you to go in there and be a Panther and tell us what they're doing and where they're at. The same thing happened with Martin Luther King. They killed him, right? They killed him, right? And Malcolm X and these guys, and Fred Hampton, every black leader that was coming up. J. Edgar Hoover had a real problem with that. And so I wanted to show you this slide. This is fake Emory Douglas cartoons. You see the pig tries to protect the white stores in black communities that rob black people. Black brothers protect black children. He's shooting a cop who has a face like a pig. Brothers and sisters deal with the white store owner that robs black people. The pig is afraid of black children because they are brave warriors. And look, they've got him dead on the ground bleeding. This is not created by Emory Douglas, but they tried to copy his style, and they made this coloring book and put it out. And the reason was to cause argument and dissension within the party, because, like you heard Kathleen Cleaver, they're not, I don't I don't want to participate in this. This is what it's going to be about. So they started arguing with one another, and that's part of what destroyed them, all the imprisonments and all that. I don't know what to say about the image of things that we learn in history. That's why at the beginning I talked about do your own research. When people say do your own research, a lot of them just go to sources that already agree with them. You have to reach beyond what you get and go to original sources, like that video I showed you. That's real 1968 Panther speaking in their own mouths. You can do that with Alexander Hamilton. I do that in Philadelphia. I can see what he actually said in letters to other people. And so you can do your own research. Don't try to convince your mom of anything different.
Okay, one more question. Yes.
I guess mine is not a question because I'm so overwhelmed, but I will say this as a person who is a lawyer by training. As a person who is a lawyer by training, and actually have had an opportunity to meet Angela Davis and Kathleen Cleaver. Mm-hmm. I'm probably revealing my age, but I was an undergraduate at Yale, and she was there in law school, and was actually one of the people who encouraged me to go to law school. I was at one of those recruitment things, and Kathleen Cleaver was recruiting people to go to Yale Law School. And I walked by the table and I said, you know, I don't think I can get into Yale Law School. And she said, well, you went to Yale undergrad, didn't you? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, you can go to Yale Law School. And then later I met her as a student. And can I just tell you, she was a mom. She had children. She studied. And I just want to say something to you. Because I know that you kept apologizing throughout your talk because there was so much information that you wanted to share. And I want to tell you thank you for that, because you're continuing a tradition of incredible African American women, and it is clear to me you have been learning and educating and teaching people your whole life, and you haven't stopped. And I really appreciate that. And I feel like I had one of the best educations a person could have. Yeah. And what you're teaching me is I did not. Mm-mm. That is not enough. And one thing, I know there was so much, but one thing that was so important to me that I never saw before was the list of all of the things, the 65 things that those young black people were doing in that community. And can I tell you, when I looked at that entire list of the food programs and the justice programs and the voter programs, the incredible sense that I have is schizophrenic. I'm so proud that people so young could be so inspirational and so focused and so, they were doing things, and then I feel so deeply disturbed that almost everything on that list that they were performing, their country should have been doing for them, their government should have been doing for them. They were paying taxes, and the services that they were providing were the very same services that white people were provided. Security, safety, food, education. And may I also just point out, even though you didn't start, you talked about slavery, but you talked about people not reading and this culture of not reading.
They weren't allowed to read.
But the thing is, it is still happening. 1,600 books are being banned right now. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Toni Morrison, Beloved. Alice Walker, The Color Purple. People think that if you stop people from reading, that you stop people from knowing their history. And what you're telling us is that too is a myth. It can slow your education, but people teaching us like you just taught us through music, art, storytelling, and you taught not just what was here, but what family connections we had to each other, was you told us that people cannot take that away from us, no matter what they do. So you schooled us, ma'am. You schooled us. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Can I respond?
Pardon me?
Can I respond?
Absolutely.
It wasn't a question, but thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate it.
What a way to end Black History Year.
Well, remember the theme. Black resistance. I see what I'm doing retiring, moving to the city where the birthplace of America, and looking at all the original documents and spending my time. I traveled throughout the South. I went to the 1619 commemoration of the landing, the actual spot. They do a commemoration. They're building a memorial there, a monument there. There's a National Park Service interpretive center, beautiful, with all this stuff about what happened and who those people were. I learned so much every single day. It makes life worthwhile for me, is to be a lifelong learner. And I recommend that to everybody. Don't ever think you know anything about anything. Especially if you learned in elementary school and everything. You know, everything's changed. So I want to thank you for what you said, and I want to share with you a personal anecdote of my own. I was going to tell you about my high school prom, senior prom. There was a boy that didn't go to my school, he went to another school, but I thought he was pretty cute. And he took me to my senior prom. Well, at a certain point, he took me, after school, we were going to go to his place. He was a kid who, when you ask him, where do you live, he'd say, I stay with my sister. Kids used to stay with their auntie, or stay at their grandmother, or stay with that sister. These are homeless kids that are couch surfing. Nowadays, we call it that, unhoused. I didn't understand that then, but it takes, you have to get to a certain old age before you can look back and see things. So he took me to the sister's place. It was in these projects, which are one of the pictures that I showed, these pink projects that are, just horrible. The sister was in there in the apartment. She had 3 little kids. They were all wearing their pajamas. This was after school. We went over there, so I knew that the kids had never been to school that day. She was friendly enough, but all over her dining room table there was weed and baggies and everything. So she was on the phone. She was doing that, and all her kids were running around. So he was like, I got to get out of here. He was so excited a month later when he said to me, I've got a place to live, my very own place. You've got to come see it. So I did. It was a storefront in San Francisco, and you walk inside, a big storefront, long urban storefront, a Victorian building, and all around the walls and in the windows, we used to have something called India imports, but it was printed Muslim material, covering all the walls and the front window. And he said, look, I have my own bed for the first time.
Sorry, you got to make it short. You got to make it short. We got our dinner reservation. We're sorry.
Well, then I won't tell you. Okay, so what he did was, he was so excited about the place. I said, this is really nice. I'm really happy for you. You have a place to live now. He said, and look at this. And he took his hand and he moved one of the wall coverings to the back. And what did I see? Guns, 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 grenades, everything lined up beautifully on little racks. I said, oh, is that it? He said, no. All the way around. So what had happened was that they gave this kid a place to live. What they did was they made him in charge of the gun cache. He's a minor. They took this kid and they're helping him by putting him, if the police had come, if there had been a fire, what would have happened to this child? And so now as an adult, I can look back and see how a lot of us were used by adults in San Francisco and Haight-Ashbury and in those days. We were used by adults, but we didn't understand what was happening. And that still happens today. Adults are using kids. But that's one of my Black Panther stories. Thank you.
Okay, would you please give her a hand clap? And
we're going to eat.
And
why don't we just go to the restaurant?
And I also want to say we have recruitment material on the table on the side. If you're interested in becoming part of Africana Studies, we've got a lot of good classes, a lot of good professors. And please, we have food. You better get to it now.